As you know, we are approaching the fantasy football playoffs in 2023, and whether you're a 1-loss team or a 2-loss team, or even a 4 or 5-loss team right now, you are fighting for seeding right now in your playoffs. And whether you're in a traditional redraft or a dynasty league, we need to start planning for the playoffs today. So last week we looked at some players to buy and sell before your fantasy football playoffs. Today we're taking a closer look at the running backs with the best fantasy football playoff schedules in this video. And I'm very interactive with my audience, looking to give you guys the content that you need to prepare for your fantasy football playoffs to win a championship. So please go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So let's go ahead and just get right into these running backs right now in no particular order, and I will discuss all of these guys right now and what you need to do with them and the type of trade package you could send to acquire these types of guys. The first guy on the list, I've been talking about this guy for weeks now. It's Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco, to me, is such a top-tier trade target, and he was last week. This week, it's even better. Last week, he was coming off a bad performance versus the Denver Broncos, and I thought that was going to be the end of it. This week, he had another pretty down performance against the Miami Dolphins, and I think right now is the perfect time to acquire this guy. So let's discuss what his playoff schedule is right now. In his playoff schedule, which for most people is going to be weeks 15 through 17, he's got to take on the New England Patriots in New England in week 15, your first round of playoffs. Then he's taking on the Las Vegas Raiders at home, and then he's taking on Cincinnati in championship week. So let's dive into what these defenses are going to present Isaiah Pacheco. New England's defense is the toughest on the docket here. They are 12th in rushing yards allowed this season, so they're not exactly some prize performance right here that you guys need to target so you can start them against New England. I would not say that New England's some defense that you want to just go out and target to play right now because they're a relatively good rushing defense. That's what they've been all year. But if you can get past that, Las Vegas' defense is dead last in rushing yards allowed this year. They have been abysmal. They're absolutely horrendously bad. And just think about it in week 9. Saquon Barkley, his quarterback, went down. So Daniel Jones is out, and also Tyrod Taylor is on the IR as well. Even with DeVito at quarterback, Saquon Barkley still put up a pretty decent game against the Las Vegas Raiders because they can't run stop at all. They're not a good run stopping team. So Kansas City taking on Las Vegas at that time of the year, that's going to be a great matchup I want in my fantasy football playoffs at that time. And then they're taking on Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's got a pretty good defense. Let's not get that wrong. Cincinnati's defense, their defensive coordinator has done a tremendous job this year, and they've got a lot of talent. But their weakness is actually the run game. They're 10th worst at stopping the run. And that's why they match up so well with a team like Buffalo, who they beat in week 9, because Buffalo doesn't run the ball very well. They're not a very good running team, and they don't stick to it. Kansas City is going to be able to take advantage of that type of matchup right here. So here's what I would do personally. You look at a guy like Gus Edwards on the Baltimore Ravens, also on a very good team that runs the ball well. He's coming off 2 straight dominant performances. Not just good. They're not just like, oh, he got like a 15-point week here and like a 16-point week the next week. No, these were 20-plus point performances from Gus Edwards the past 2 weeks. I would package him together with a guy like Hollywood Brown, who people seem to really like to try to buy low right now, and I would try to get an Isaiah Pacheco out of it. Or I would even do this. I got a comment on my buy low trade target video for week 10 about how Josh Jacobs was not a guy you want to send away. I just want to address anybody who thinks Josh Jacobs is a good buy, not buy low, but a good guy to trade for right now, or a good guy to hold on to. Let's just discuss something really quick. Josh Jacobs has the 5th worst rest of season strength of schedule, and he's also got playoff opponents in your fantasy football playoffs, like the Los Angeles Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs. They've also got some very tough opponents over the next several weeks. So take that performance that he had in week 9, where they took on the New York Giants defense, and then also combine that with the fact that this team was very pumped after Mike McDaniels was gone. That performance is not going to carry into weeks where they're taking on real opponents. The Chargers defense, one of the best at stopping the run. The Chiefs defense, a very good defense at stopping the run as well. I would send Josh Jacobs straight up for Pacheco because the reality is you could probably get more in addition to Pacheco, and I want his playoff roster. I want his playoff schedule on my roster. Jonathan Taylor is the next running back that has a great playoff schedule right now. So Jonathan Taylor, to me, it's going to be a little bit harder to buy him low after a week that he just had, right? This is not a buy low video. This is a acquire video because these guys have great playoff schedules. So if you have to pay up for Jonathan Taylor, it probably is going to be worth it because in your playoffs right now, week 15, he takes on the Pittsburgh Steelers. On paper, doesn't sound great. We'll get into that in a minute. Then he's got the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta and then the Las Vegas Raiders again. So let's get into Pittsburgh right now. Yeah, Pittsburgh's got a, on paper, really good defense. They're very good at certain things. They're good at creating turnovers, and they're also good at getting after your quarterback. But Pittsburgh's defense along the way, they've become the 7th worst defense at stopping the run in the entire league through the first 9 weeks of the NFL season. Then they've got Atlanta, who is the 17th worst, so they're basically middle of the pack. But let's take a little bit of a closer look at that to see how they're projecting and how they're trajecting, what their trajectory is like moving forward. Over the last 3 weeks, Atlanta has given up 368 rushing yards over the last 3 games. That's a terrible mark, and it's actually, as you can see, getting worse. And the reality is it will not get better because this team is actually starting to get really frustrated from what I'm seeing from the way Arthur Smith is running this team. So they're a team that could easily become a distracted team that just wants their coach gone and they start playing worse. See what the Raiders did over the past several weeks trying to get rid of Josh McDaniels. This is a team I'm keeping my eye on, and I don't fear this matchup for Jonathan Taylor. And then, of course, they're playing the Raiders, which I just discussed is dead last at stopping the run. This is what I would do for Jonathan Taylor right now. Like I said, you're probably not going to be able to buy Jonathan Taylor low after the week 9 performance that he just had in fantasy football. You're starting to see that Jonathan Taylor is separating. He's not really sharing the backfield as much if you take it from week 9 with Zach Moss. He handled the majority of the backfield in that blowout win versus the Panthers. I would send Saquon Barkley straight up for Jonathan Taylor. And I'll tell you why. When you look at Saquon Barkley, as I've been saying over the past several weeks, he is the Giants offense. This Giants offense does not work without Saquon Barkley. There's no question about that. Here's what Saquon's got coming up for him. He's taking on the Saints, the Eagles, and the Rams in the fantasy football playoffs this year. The Saints and the Eagles, they're both top 12 rushing defenses, and the Eagles are the number 1, the toughest rushing defense in the entire league. And the Rams are a good team to play for a running defense. But here's the other problem with this. Saquon Barkley now has no Tyrod Taylor. And now it's been confirmed that Daniel Jones has a torn ACL, and he will be without Daniel Jones as well. If you thought their passing attack was bad and this team was unbalanced before, they've got Tommy DeVito as their quarterback now. It's a bad situation right here for Saquon Barkley. And when you've got that much imbalance on an offense, it's almost impossible to get the run game going. I will take the guy on the better offense with the better playoff schedule in preparation for my fantasy playoffs because the upside with Jonathan Taylor is higher than the upside with Saquon Barkley at this point. Breece Hall is the next guy I really want to trade for in preparation for my fantasy playoffs. First of all, Breece Hall is just such an electric player that we all know this. Breece Hall is going to be a guy who is going to consistently get you big plays because that's what he does. He's not on the best offense. He doesn't have the best offensive line. And in fact, in a lot of games, when you just look at the box score and look at the carries that he's handling and the work he's doing with the carries, you wouldn't think he'd have a big week. The good thing is this guy's involved in the passing game as well, so keep that in mind when we look at this schedule right here. Weeks 15 through 17. He's got the Miami Dolphins defense in Miami. Then he takes on the Washington Commanders defense in New Orleans. And then he's got Cleveland in Cleveland. So obviously Cleveland's not great. But let's discuss Miami and Washington. So Miami, they're actually about middle of the pack as far as stopping the run on the season so far. But much like we did with the Atlanta Falcons, let's look at Miami closer. So Miami has lost 3 games this year, and the 3 losses they've had, they've actually gotten a little bit embarrassed. They've been overpowered. They've been bullied in a lot of those games. The games that they're winning, they're scoring tons of points on, and a lot of them have been against defenses like New England's defense, Carolina's defense, the Denver Broncos defense. So they weren't exactly playing great defenses right out of the gate. Here's what we've seen over Miami's defense over their 3 losses that they've experienced. They've given up 299 rushing yards in their 3 losses this year. That's almost 100 yards per game, and they lost to teams like Kansas City, Buffalo, and Philadelphia. Now, what do those teams all have in common? Well, they all have top-level defenses. The Chiefs are a great defense right now. The Philadelphia Eagles, they're number 1 at stopping the run, as we discussed earlier. And then when you look at Buffalo's defense, they're a very good turnover defense, and they punched them in the mouth in that appearance the first time they played each other this year. Here's the thing. All of those defenses are great, but the good thing is, and the real problem here for Miami, is that game scripts. Whenever you're in a game script that's more competitive or you're trailing, that helps the opponent's rushing. So if you've got Miami up 4 touchdowns on somebody, the team can't run. That's why these numbers are so skewed. And the reality is, if you're going based on these losses, Miami's defense is not a tough opponent to take on from a rushing perspective. They've also got Washington, 9th worst in the league at stopping the run, and they're getting worse without Chase Young and without Montez Sweat. And then obviously, like I said, Cleveland, they're a tough one. 7th best defense in the league as far as stopping the run. So they're not an easy defense here. But the point is, like I said earlier, Breece Hall gets involved with the passing game as well. This is a guy who is going to continue to provide you big plays. And with those first 2 matchups right here, he's going to help get you to the fantasy football championship. What I would do, I would try to get a guy like Rachaad White off a big week. Package him together with a wide receiver like Gabe Davis or Cortland Sutton or maybe Josh Downs. Or I would go with a guy like James Cook. Package him together with one of those wide receivers. Try to get a Breece Hall, because the reality is the upside with Breece Hall is going to be much higher rest of season and for your fantasy football playoffs than all of these other guys. The last guy on the list that I'm looking to trade for, and I think that really the important thing to know with this guy here is he's not a buy low by any means, and he's going to be one of the toughest guys to trade for in all of fantasy football. It's Austin Ekeler. This is a no-brainer. Like, yeah, you want Austin Ekeler for your playoffs. Man, I'm some genius over here. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. I'm not claiming that I'm some genius because I have Austin Ekeler as a great fantasy football running back for your playoffs. The reason why I want to discuss Austin Ekeler here is because the playoff schedule is truly tremendous right now. Weeks 15 through 17, he's taking on Denver, then he's taking on the Raiders, and then he's taking on Buffalo. Denver, 2nd worst at stopping the run, only behind Las Vegas. They're the last. Of course, basically any running back who's taking on the Raiders over the next several weeks, you want that guy in your lineup. That's the message here. And the Buffalo, as good as they've been defensively, they're 11th worst at stopping the run right here. Now, here's the problem with a guy like Austin Ekeler. Obviously, like I said, you're not going to buy Austin Ekeler low. Nobody's falling for that, right? Like, nobody's going to say, yeah, I'll give you Austin Ekeler for Ramondre Stevenson or Alexander Madison off a good week. You're not going to make that happen. But there is a level of uncertainty in the air with Austin Ekeler over the past several weeks. Do you not agree with me? That's been a big part of his last couple weeks. Before that last game against the Bears, he was struggling for several weeks. So there's a little bit of uncertainty with there. And if you can get someone just a little bit uncertain, I would package together a guy like Raheem Mostert and Adam Thielen for Austin Ekeler straight up. Or maybe in addition, you could possibly get a guy like Josh Downs or Rashee Rice in addition. Or get a guy like Josh Jacobs. Pair him together with a Michael Pittman for Austin Ekeler. It's not going to work for everybody. This is not a buy low scenario. But if you can get someone with just a little bit of a seed of doubt here with Austin Ekeler, this is a guy that not only would I do this in a redraft league, but I would actually do this in a dynasty league and then look to sell him after I won a fantasy football championship. So let me know what your record is in the comments below and what questions you need answered for Week 10 fantasy football. And if you want to see some buy low trade targets before Week 10 fantasy football, click on this video right here.